I never thought my own son would be the one to lock my front door and leave me on the other side. It started small, a few gentle suggestions about resting more, pamphlets about nursing homes I never asked to see. Then one morning, I was sitting in the passenger seat, suitcase by my knees, and Ethan was smiling like this was a kindness, not a goodbye. He said it was temporary, just a few weeks to recover. But as the miles rolled on, I watched my house fade in the mirror, and something deep inside me whispered, I wasn't coming back. Because the woman he loved most wasn't me anymore. It was the one who wanted my home, my memories, my bedroom. Before I tell you how I found out what they really did while I was gone, make sure you're subscribed, because this story starts quiet, but it doesn't stay that way for long. Now let's get into it. My name is Margaret Lawson, 68 years old, retired school teacher, and proud owner of a house that still smells faintly of lemon polish and Sunday mornings. This home isn't just wood and walls, it's my life's history. Every corner, every creak of the floorboards, every chip in the paint carries a memory of my husband, Henry. He built this place for us with his own hands. We planted the hydrangeas by the porch the summer after we married. I can still picture his laugh echoing through these rooms, warm and patient like sunlight through curtains. After Henry passed 10 years ago, the house felt emptier, yes, but never lonely. I filled the silence with books, with piano practice, with visits from my son, Ethan. He'd stop by once or twice a month, always in a hurry, but I cherished every minute. His wife, Sophie, usually came along, dressed perfectly, smelling of expensive perfume, her words wrapped in politeness but her eyes scanning everything around her, as if appraising my life. At first, I told myself she was just curious. Young people today, they like things modern. But soon, her remarks grew sharper. It's charming, Margaret, she said once, brushing her manicured nails along the old oak banister. But don't you ever feel like it's too much work for you alone? Another time, she wrinkled her nose at my floral drapes. These patterns are so nostalgic. She meant outdated. I smiled, poured her tea, and said nothing. Ethan never corrected her. He just sighed and said, Mom, Sophie has a point. You should be taking it easy now. Let someone else handle all this cleaning and gardening. I told him I liked my little routines. They keep me busy. Ethan, and this house, I gestured around. It keeps me company. He smiled faintly, the way people do when they're pretending to understand. Of course, Mom, but still, it's a lot for you. You shouldn't have to climb stairs with that arthritis acting up. I brushed it off. My knees ached, sure, but I'd lived with worse. I thought that was the end of it. I didn't realize it was the beginning of something far larger. Over the next few weeks, Sophie kept bringing up care homes, gently at first, then more often. She sent me pamphlets full of bright photos, old women smiling over puzzle boards, nurses holding trays of soup. It's not what you think, she'd insist. They're wonderful places. You'd have people to talk to, and we'd visit every week. Every week. That phrase sat wrong with me. I had neighbors, friends, my garden, my piano. I wasn't lonely, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Was I being stubborn? A burden even? One evening, Ethan came over alone. No Sophie this time. He looked nervous, like he was about to ask for money. We had dinner, simple stew, my husband's recipe. Afterward, he cleared his throat and said, Mom, I found a nice facility just outside town. It's temporary, just while your joints recover. They'll help with medication and therapy. It'll give you some rest. He said it kindly, as if he were doing me a favor. I searched his face, wanting to believe him. He was my boy, my only child. I thought of how Henry used to ruffle his hair and say, Take care of your mother, son. Temporary? I asked softly. Of course, he said quickly. A few weeks at most. Then you can come back home. Sophie joined us a few minutes later, appearing in the doorway like she'd been waiting outside to hear my answer. Her tone was sweet, but too smooth. We'll visit all the time, Margaret. You'll see. It'll be fun, like a little vacation. A vacation. I smiled weakly. though something inside me tightened. My home didn't feel like something I could leave behind, not even for a week, but I didn't want to be difficult. Maybe they were right. Maybe I did need a rest. That night, I packed a small suitcase, just enough clothes for 2 weeks, my photo album, and Henry's wristwatch. I ran my fingers along the dining table he built, the piano keys we'd polished together. I whispered, "I'll be back soon." The next morning, Ethan arrived early. He was unusually cheerful, almost relieved. Sophie handled the packing, her heels clicking briskly across the floor. "Don't worry, Margaret. I've labeled everything for storage. We'll keep the house spotless while you're gone." She said it like a promise, but it felt like a claim. I turned at the doorway, letting my eyes travel through the living room one last time. The faded rug, the lace curtains, the family photos on the mantel. My throat tightened. I didn't want to cry, not in front of them. Ethan touched my shoulder gently. "You'll be home before you know it, Mom." I nodded. "I trust you, dear." Those words would come back to haunt me. The drive to the nursing home was quiet. Ethan hummed softly to the radio while I stared out at the passing streets, the familiar ones giving way to stretches of countryside. When the facility came into view, clean, white, trimmed hedges, I tried to convince myself it wasn't so bad. Maybe they truly just wanted me to rest. The staff smiled warmly as they checked me in. My room was small but neat. There was a single bed, a dresser, a window that faced the garden. Ethan helped me settle in, said he'd visit that weekend. Sophie kissed my cheek, lightly, carefully, and said, "You'll thank us later." When they left, the silence pressed around me. I sat on the bed and opened my suitcase. Henry's watch gleamed faintly under the light. I wound it once, listening to the ticking fill the room. That sound reminded me of time moving forward, slow, steady, unstoppable. I told myself it was only temporary, just a few weeks, then I'd go home. But deep down, a whisper inside me asked the question I didn't want to hear. What if they never meant for me to come back? I woke up early that morning, long before the sun had properly risen, and just sat at the edge of my bed, listening to the soft creaks of the house. It was the same sound I'd heard every day for over 40 years, yet that day it felt different. Final somehow. The faint scent of coffee from the kitchen made my heart ache. I used to wake up to that smell when Henry was alive. He always brewed a pot before I even opened my eyes. The thought made me swallow hard. I didn't want to cry, not yet. Ethan and Sophie were due at 9. I made breakfast. Habit, I suppose. Old routines are hard to break. Toast, eggs, and tea for one. I couldn't bring myself to set out 3 plates like I usually did. Around 8:30, I heard Sophie's car pull into the driveway, the sharp click of her heels echoing up the porch. She stepped inside with her usual brightness. "Good morning, Margaret. Ready for your big day?" Her tone was sugar-coated, but I could feel the impatience underneath. Ethan followed, carrying an overnight bag and the paperwork for my admission. He looked tired, but forced a smile. "Hey, Mom, you packed everything?" I nodded, pointing to the small suitcase by the door. "Just the essentials. I didn't want to take too much." "That's good," Sophie said quickly, scanning the living room. "Less clutter when we do the deep clean." Her voice faltered slightly as she noticed me watching her. So it's easier to tidy up, of course." I looked around the house one more time. The morning light filtered through the lace curtains, the dust dancing like gold in the air. The piano sat quietly in the corner, untouched but not forgotten. My eyes rested on Henry's photograph on the mantelpiece. I whispered, "I'll be back soon, love." The ride to the nursing home was quiet. Ethan tried to fill the silence with small talk about work and traffic. Sophie scrolled through her phone, sighing occasionally as if the entire situation was a mild inconvenience. I stared out the window, watching familiar landmarks fade into distance. The bakery where Ethan used to get cinnamon rolls as a boy, the park where we fed ducks together. Each turn of the road felt like leaving a part of myself behind. When we arrived, the facility stood there like a postcard. White walls, manicured lawns, flowers planted in perfect rows. The sign out front read, Sunny Grove Care Center. It sounded pleasant enough, but the air felt heavy, sterile, and too clean, like the kind of place that tries too hard to seem happy. Inside, everything gleamed. Floors polished, walls painted pastel yellow, soft music playing overhead. A nurse greeted us warmly and offered tea. She called me Mrs. Lawson in that rehearsed tone people use with patients, not people. My room was small but tidy, a single bed, a desk, a dresser, and a window that overlooked the garden. There was even a small vase of fake flowers on the table. Sophie opened the curtains and smiled. See? It's nice, isn't it? Her voice was bright, too bright. Ethan added, It's just temporary, Mom. Get some rest, make some new friends. You'll feel better in no time. I nodded, forcing a smile. As long as you promise to visit. Of course, Ethan said. Every weekend. Sophie echoed, every weekend, like it was a line she'd memorized. A staff member came to finalize the papers. I watched Ethan sign my name in a few places. He'd already filled most of it out, said it was just standard forms. I didn't question it. I should have. When they were ready to leave, Sophie hugged me lightly. Take care, Margaret, and don't worry about the house. We'll make sure everything stays perfect. Her perfume lingered even after she stepped back. Ethan kissed my forehead. I'll call you tomorrow. The door closed behind them, and the room fell silent. I sat down on the bed, my suitcase still unopened. Through the window, I could see them walking to the car. Sophie laughed at something he said. Then they drove off, their car shrinking to a dot and finally disappearing around the bend. I stayed by the window long after, the light shifting from gold to gray. Dinner came and went. The nurse stopped by to check my vitals, smiling kindly, unaware of the ache inside my chest. When the lights dimmed, I still hadn't unpacked. The next morning, I forced myself to explore. The hallways smelled faintly of disinfectant and lemon cleaner. Residents moved slowly, some chatting in soft voices, others staring at the TV in the common room. There was a woman playing solitaire at a small table near the window. She looked up and smiled. "First day?" she asked. Her voice was raspy but warm. "Yes," I replied. "Margaret Lawson." "Lydia Price," she said, extending a wrinkled hand. "Welcome to the waiting room of life." I laughed softly, surprised by my own voice. "That's one way to put it." She shrugged. "Might as well call it what it is. You'll get used to it. We all do, eventually." Over the next few days, Lydia became my friend. She was funny, sharp, and brutally honest. We spent afternoons talking by the garden fence, trading stories about our younger days. She told me about her late husband, her grandchildren, her dislike for bingo. She made the place bearable. Still, every night I sat by the window, waiting for Ethan's car to appear in the parking lot. The first weekend came and went, no visit, no call. The second weekend, I told myself they were probably busy. The third, I stopped making excuses. The nurses began calling me by my first name. The days blurred together, meals, medication, small talk. But at night, when everything went still, I'd close my eyes and see my house, the curtains fluttering in the breeze, the ticking of Henry's watch on the table, the warm smell of coffee in the morning. And each time, the ache inside grew heavier. By the end of the month, I stopped saying temporary out loud. I still believed I'd go home eventually. But belief, I was learning, could be a very fragile thing. By the second month, I had settled into the rhythm of Sunny Grove. Or rather, I had learned to move with its slow tide. Morning vitals at 7:30, breakfast by 8, activities, knitting, puzzles, seated yoga, scattered through the day, the same soft piano music playing in loops overhead. The smell of oatmeal and disinfectant became so constant I barely noticed it anymore. My room felt like a borrowed space. I hadn't unpacked half my suitcase. Henry's watch stayed on the nightstand, its tick, the only reminder that time outside was still moving. Ethan hadn't called. Not once. At first, I told myself he was busy. He had work, responsibilities. Sophie probably kept him running errands or managing his business. But week after week passed without a single word. No voicemail, no text, no, "How are you, Mom?" On Sunday afternoons, when families came to visit their parents or grandparents, bringing flowers, pastries, sometimes even grandchildren, I'd sit in the garden with Lydia and pretend I wasn't watching the parking lot. She noticed, of course. Lydia noticed everything. "You keep staring at that gate like Prince Charming's late," she said one afternoon. I laughed softly. "Just hoping for a familiar car, that's all." She hummed. "Hoping's not the same as expecting. So which is it?" I didn't answer. The truth was starting to creep in, quiet and cruel. I wasn't waiting for Ethan to visit anymore. I was waiting for myself to accept that he wouldn't. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. It was a Wednesday. Lydia and I were in the common room, pretending to be interested in a documentary playing on the wall-mounted television. A volunteer named Brianna, sweet girl, maybe 19, walked in carrying a stack of newspapers and handed them out like she always did. "Something to read after bingo," she chirped. I took mine absent-mindedly. The Community Beacon, one of those glossy neighborhood magazines that featured local events, gardening tips, recipes, and the occasional fluff interview. I flipped through it slowly, pausing at a headline. "Modern Elegance in a Historic Home, a Young Couple's Fresh Take on Tradition." I froze. There, spread across 2 pages, were photos of my living room, my floor, my walls. Except they weren't mine anymore. Gone were the floral curtains and wooden shelves. The rug I'd crocheted by hand had vanished. The mantel now held abstract sculptures and metallic candle holders, but I recognized the window frame, the curved archway leading into the kitchen. That was my house. In the center of the page stood Ethan and Sophie, smiling wide, arms around each other. The caption beneath read, "Ethan and Sophie Lawson invite us inside their stunning renovation of a family heirloom property." Family heirloom. I kept blinking, convinced my eyes were lying. But no, it was real. Every photo a different angle of my home, even my bedroom, though it looked nothing like it had. The walls were now slate gray. The quilt Henry and I had picked out was gone. My vanity had been replaced with a mirrored dresser. In one photo, Sophie stood proudly in what used to be my room, pointing at an open closet filled with shoes and handbags, a walk-in closet. She'd turned my bedroom into a closet. My stomach turned. I dropped the magazine. Lydia, who had noticed the color drain from my face, picked it up and followed my eyes. "Is that?" she asked softly. "My home," I whispered. She looked back at the pages, her jaw tightening. Those bastards. I didn't cry. Not yet. I felt something colder, like ice in my lungs, something between rage and heartbreak. That evening, I called Ethan's number. No answer. I tried again the next day, straight to voicemail. On Friday, Sophie finally picked up. "Oh, Margaret, sorry, I meant to call," she said breezily. I kept my voice calm. "I saw the article." A pause, then a light laugh. "Wasn't it stunning? The photographer was amazing, really captured the essence." "The essence of my home," I said. "Oh, come on, Margaret, it's still your home. We just modernized it a bit. You wouldn't believe how much junk we had to clear out. That attic was a nightmare." "Junk?" I echoed, feeling my fingers clench around the phone. "I didn't mean it like that, of course. Look, the place needed a refresh. You'll see it when you come back. It'll feel like a spa." "I thought this was temporary," I said. Another pause. Then her tone shifted slightly. "Of course, but, well, Ethan and I figured it made sense to get a head start on things. We've got big plans, Margaret, and it's not like you were using that space." I hung up without another word. I sat on the edge of my bed that night for hours, staring at the wall. Henry's watch ticked beside me. I kept hearing Sophie's voice. "You weren't using that space. Like I was gone already. Like I was dead. I didn't sleep. My mind was on fire." The next day, I called an old neighbor, Mrs. Turner. She'd lived across the street from us since Ethan was 10. She sounded surprised, but happy to hear from me. We chatted briefly, weather, garden gossip, the usual, before I asked casually, So, how's the old street looking these days? There was a pause on the line. Well, I suppose it's a little livelier. Sophie has been organizing things, wine nights, redecorating. She's got the painters in and everything. So they've moved in? I asked. Her voice lowered. I thought you knew, dear. They've been living there full-time for over a month. Sophie told us you'd moved away permanently. Permanently? She said the house was theirs now, said you'd given it to them, that it was part of your will or something. I couldn't speak. My throat closed up. The room tilted. I managed a soft thank you and hung up the call. I sat there in silence. My house, my memories, my life. Claimed, decorated, displayed, and now, apparently, gone. That night, when Lydia stopped by to ask if I wanted to join her for evening TV, she found me sitting in the dark. You all right? They've taken it, I said. She frowned. What do you mean? I turned to her, my voice steady, cold. They're not just living in it. They're claiming it. Sophie told the neighbors it belongs to them, that I gave it away. Lydia crossed her arms. And did you? No. She sat down beside me. Then it's time we find out exactly what they've done. I looked at her, heart pounding. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel forgotten. I felt angry. Very, very angry. And I was ready to do something about it. After that night, something inside me hardened. I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. Not while my life was being stripped away behind my back. For weeks, I'd been swallowing my hurt, wrapping it in excuses. But that magazine article, the phone call with Sophie, the conversation with Mrs. Turner, they tore away whatever illusions I'd been clinging to. The next morning, over tea with Lydia, I told her everything. She didn't flinch, didn't act surprised, just nodded slowly, then said, They always think we're too old to do anything about it. Maybe I have been, I admitted, my voice low. I let them take me out of my home. I trusted them. Trust, Lydia said with a snort, is a currency they spend fast and cheap. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said, I need to find out exactly what they've done. If they've filed papers, changed deeds, anything. Lydia leaned in, eyes glinting. You ever hear from that lawyer you used after your husband passed? I hadn't thought of Daniel Reed in years. He handled Henry's estate, gentle, patient, always respectful. I remembered how he made sure I understood every step of the process, even when I was too numb with grief to think straight. I think I still have his card, I said slowly. The next step was trickier. No smartphones, no internet access at Sunny Grove. But Lydia had a son who visited every Thursday. She handed me a slip of paper one evening and said, Give him this number. My son will let you use his phone if you ask nice. 2 days later, I made the call. My hands trembled as I dialed. I didn't even know if Daniel still practiced law. But when his voice came through, deeper, older, but unmistakable, I felt a small breath of hope. Daniel Reed speaking. Mr. Reed, it's Margaret Lawson. I don't know if you remember me. There was a pause, then a warm, surprised, Margaret, of course I do. How are you? Well, not great. That's why I'm calling. We arranged to speak in more detail 2 days later. He said he'd come to the facility in person. I hung up the phone feeling something I hadn't in weeks, a sense of movement, a sense of purpose. When Daniel arrived, he looked much the same. Grayer hair, a few more lines around his eyes, but still that steady presence. We sat in a quiet corner of the garden, Lydia keeping watch like a hawk from the patio. I told him everything. The nursing home, the promises of it being temporary, the magazine article, the neighbor's revelation. He listened intently, taking notes. I want to know if they've done something legal, I said. I never signed anything, at least I don't think I did. Daniel nodded. If there's any paperwork filed under your name, we'll find it. A week passed. Then, late one afternoon, I received a sealed envelope delivered to the front desk. Inside was a letter from Daniel and photocopies of several documents. I sat on the edge of my bed and unfolded them slowly. The first was a voluntary transfer of deed form, transferring partial ownership of my home to Ethan and Sophie. It had my signature at the bottom, except it wasn't mine. The writing was close, too close. But I knew my hand. I knew the slight curl on the L in Lawson, the neat cross I always made on my T. Whoever had done this, they'd studied my writing carefully, but they hadn't replicated it perfectly. The second form was a power of attorney document, again supposedly signed by me. It gave Ethan control over decisions related to the property. I stared at it for a long time. My chest felt tight. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Daniel's note was short, typed neatly. Margaret, these documents were filed 3 weeks after your admission to Sunny Grove. Based on our prior work, I know your signature well enough to say this is forged. We will need to proceed carefully, but we do have a case. Let's talk when you're ready. DR. That evening, Lydia and I sat on the garden bench in the fading light. He forged my name, I said quietly. Twice. Lydia lit a cigarette, cupping her hand from the breeze. You gonna let that slide? I looked at her, something shifting in my chest. No, I said. No, I'm not. From that moment on, everything I did was deliberate. I began keeping a notebook, small, leather-bound, hidden in a hollowed-out Bible that sat on my nightstand. I recorded dates, times Ethan and Sophie called, things they said, things I overheard from other staff about their brief visits. I even jotted down snippets of conversations I could recall from those first few weeks. Sophie's remarks about the attic, Ethan's hesitation when he signed my admission papers. I wore the same polite smile when Sophie finally visited a few days later. She brought scented lotion and a bag of tea I didn't ask for. How are they treating you, Margaret? She asked brightly. Very well, I said, sipping tea. The staff are lovely. She looked relieved, as if she feared I'd confront her. I didn't. I played my part, an old woman, grateful and forgetful. She began to talk about the house, how they'd finally finished the kitchen remodel, how everyone just adores the new tile. She giggled. Ethan's planning to start a blog, home improvement, DIY tips, that sort of thing. You'd be proud. I smiled. That's wonderful, dear. She touched my arm gently. I hope you understand, Margaret. We're just trying to build a life. And you've done so much already. You deserve rest. Rest. That word again, as if I were some relic to be placed on a shelf. After she left, I added to my notebook, spoke about house remodel, mentioned Ethan's blog, said I deserve rest. Tone condescending, evasive. Each entry felt like a stitch, sewing together a case no one else could see yet. But I could feel it forming. A record, a reckoning. Lydia read over my shoulder one evening and said, You ever think of being a detective? I laughed. Just a mother who's had enough. Daniel and I continued exchanging letters through Lydia's son. We were building something. Quietly. Carefully. The plan wasn't clear yet, but the direction was. I wasn't going to confront them right away. That would be foolish. Let them think I'm harmless. Let them get comfortable. Let them believe they've won. Because when the truth comes crashing down, I want to be there to watch it. There's a kind of calm that comes after heartbreak. Not peace, exactly. More like resolve. A steadying. That's what I felt in the days that followed. My emotions had screamed themselves hoarse, and now they simply watched, silent but sharp, as I moved forward with purpose. Each morning at Sunny Grove, I performed my little routine. I smiled at the nurses and nodded during seated yoga, chuckled at the evening game shows. I was, to them, the picture of quiet contentment, the sweet older lady who had finally adjusted. Behind the curtain of politeness, however, I was documenting everything. My notebook grew thicker by the day, dates, quotes, visitors, legal references Daniel mailed me in neat little packets. Lydia started calling me the archivist. You've got a stronger case file than the FBI, she joked one evening, and she wasn't wrong. Daniel had confirmed the power of attorney Ethan used to access my property had been submitted under false pretenses. The signature was forged, the notaries suspiciously unaffiliated with any legal registry. It was enough to start a legal inquiry, but we both agreed. This needed more than lawyers. It needed exposure, confrontation. Still, timing was everything. If I moved too early, Ethan and Sophie could cover their tracks, deny everything, play innocent in court. I needed to catch them off guard, make them feel invincible first. So I played the part. When Sophie called again, I pretended to forget what day it was. "Oh, I thought it was Tuesday," I said, chuckling. "It's Friday, Margaret," she said slowly, like speaking to a child. "Isn't that something?" I replied cheerfully. She updated me on the new patio set they'd ordered, how Ethan was really getting into real estate now. She even mentioned a little get-together they were planning, a celebration of sorts. "Just a small thing," she said. "We thought, why not break in the new space? Make it feel like ours." That word, ours. I let it sit for a moment before responding. "That sounds lovely, dear. I'm so happy for you both." After she hung up, I turned to Lydia, who had been listening quietly nearby. "I think they're planning a party," I said. Lydia grinned. "Oh, honey, this is getting juicy." I updated Daniel immediately. He responded with a single line. "Perfect. Let them throw it. I'll be there." The days leading up to the party were electric. Lydia and I spent late nights whispering like schoolgirls, plotting everything down to the minute. Daniel would arrive early and wait nearby. I'd dress modestly, understated like a forgotten guest. We'd let Sophie play hostess, let Ethan soak in his delusion. And then, just when they thought the night couldn't get better, we'd knock. Still, even with the plan set in motion, there were moments when the weight of it all tried to pull me down. I'd look around my small room at Sunny Grove and think of the bedroom I once called mine. The way Henry's coat used to hang on the closet door, the drawer that still held my mother's brooch. Were those things still there? Or had they already been tossed, donated, discarded like leftovers? One afternoon, Lydia and I sat by the garden and she said, "Do you ever think about what you'll say?" "To them?" I asked. She nodded. "All the time." I didn't want to scream. I didn't want a scene. What I wanted was truth, delivered plainly, the weight of facts, the force of evidence, a confrontation not out of anger, but out of justice. Daniel continued to build the case. He uncovered bank statements showing Ethan had begun using the house as collateral for a new line of credit. Sophie had filed a change of address form with my name still attached, implying I had relocated permanently. It was more than betrayal. It was identity theft, life theft, and still, they hadn't the faintest idea that I knew. One day, a nurse at Sunny Grove asked if I'd like to join the weekly craft circle. I said yes. I sat among the others cutting colored paper into shapes, but inside, my mind was ticking like Henry's old watch. Every snip of the scissors, another thought filed away. I wasn't crafty. I was calculating. When I returned to my room, I found a letter from Daniel waiting on my pillow. Inside was a timeline of everything they'd done, step by step. The forgery, the transfer, the renovations, the party announcement posted on Sophie's public account. At the bottom of the letter he'd written, "Let's give them a night to remember." I folded the letter carefully, placed it inside the hollow Bible beneath my nightstand and sat down. I looked out the window where the sun was setting behind the hedge. Its golden light reminded me of early mornings at my old house, the ones where Henry used to bring me coffee in bed and say, "We built something good here." Yes, we did. And I was going to take it back, not just the house, my name, my dignity, my story. And I was going to do it on their perfect little night. If there's one thing I learned as a school teacher, it's how to wear a mask. You can't walk into a classroom every day and carry your burdens on your sleeve. Not when 30 children are looking up at you, waiting for guidance. You smile. You steady your voice. And no matter what storm rages inside, you make them feel safe. Now, decades later, I wore that mask again. Not for students, but for my son. For Sophie. For everyone who thought I was just another frail woman tucked away in a nursing home, waiting quietly for her life to end. They believed I was harmless. I let them. When Ethan called, rarely and always briefly, I greeted him like a child on Christmas. "Ethan, it's so good to hear your voice. How are you, dear?" He was distant, distracted. "Busy, Mom. Just wanted to check in. Everything good?" "Oh, yes. The food's a little bland, but the staff are sweet as pie." He chuckled, more out of obligation than affection. "Glad to hear it. Sophie sends her love." "Tell her I miss her," I'd say gently. I didn't. Every conversation was a performance, every interaction a scene rehearsed in my head before delivery. I played the part so well, I began to wonder if I should have taken up acting in my retirement. Meanwhile, Daniel and I continued working behind the scenes. He visited twice under the guise of old family friend, bringing new developments with each meeting. Lydia dubbed these visits spy briefings. In our third briefing, Daniel shared something damning. Sophie had applied for a home equity loan using the property, my property, as collateral. That meant financial fraud layered on top of forgery. They weren't just thieves, they were gamblers, betting on my silence. And I was letting them believe it was a sure thing. One afternoon, Sophie appeared unannounced. She swept into my room in a white blouse and gold earrings, carrying a designer tote bag and her usual artificial cheer. "Margaret!" I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by. She sat down before I could invite her. "How are things here? Still knitting sweaters for the grandkids?" "I don't have any grandchildren," I said with a smile. She blinked, then laughed. "Oh, right, I meant, for the other residents. You always were generous." I nodded slowly. "Of course." She handed me a bag of herbal teas and a bathrobe, tags still on. "Just a little something. Thought you'd like to feel pampered." I accepted it with the gratitude of a woman who didn't see the price tag. We made small talk. She told me about the new backsplash in the kitchen, the fresh coat of paint in the hallway, how the neighbors were obsessed with the changes. "Ethan's thinking of starting a YouTube channel, home renovations, DIY tricks, that kind of thing. He's got a knack for it." "I'm sure he does," I said, sipping lukewarm tea. She crossed her legs, leaned in slightly. "Margaret, we really want to keep honoring the house. It's part of our legacy now." "Our." I tilted my head. "I do hope you're taking care of Henry's roses. They don't like too much water." "Oh," she said vaguely. "The yard's being redone completely. The landscapers said it needed a fresh start." Fresh start. Translation: uprooted and discarded. After she left, I pulled out my notebook and began recording. Sophie's visit. Mentions YouTube channel, full landscaping, tone dismissive. Gifted bathrobe plus teas, likely for image. Indicated permanent intentions. Lydia read over my shoulder. "You're building an encyclopedia of betrayal." I smiled faintly. They'll need a map to crawl back out of this. Each day that passed added another piece to the puzzle. Daniel and I now had copies of the fraudulent deed, power of attorney, loan application, and multiple public posts tying Ethan and Sophie to full occupancy. But it wasn't just the legal case that mattered to me. It was the performance, the illusion. Because in a few days, they were going to throw that little celebration, the one Sophie had called our forever home party. And I was going to be the ghost that showed up. Until then, I played my part. I wore the smile. I listened to the radio shows. I attended knitting club, even though I hated knitting. And in the quiet moments, I practiced what I would say. I stood in front of my mirror, pretending it was Ethan or Sophie or one of those smug guests sipping wine in my living room. I imagined the silence when I stepped through that door, the gasps, the nervous laughter, the disbelief. I wasn't just planning a return, I was rehearsing for the final act. And every day they believed I was fading. I was only sharpening. I wasn't done, not even close. The invitation came, not to me, of course, but to the public. Sophie posted it on her social media, one of those perfectly curated announcements with soft lighting, golden hour filters, and carefully chosen words. excited to welcome friends and neighbors to our Forever Home celebration this Saturday. Come see how we've transformed a classic family house into a modern oasis. A modern oasis. I stared at the words, reading them again and again. The photo she used as the backdrop was the front porch, my porch. The same one Henry had painted that gentle sage green one summer when I insisted on doing it myself and gave up halfway through. I remembered the way he smiled as he took over, humming to the radio, sleeves rolled up. And now here it was, filtered, rebranded, ready to be flaunted as someone else's victory. Lydia clicked her tongue and shoved her glasses higher on her nose. They really do think you're gone. I said nothing, just folded the printout Daniel had given me. He'd found the post within hours of it going live and delivered it in person with a half grin. This is the moment, he said. They're proud, loud, which means they're vulnerable. We laid out the plan again, crisp and clear. Daniel would arrive at the party disguised as a guest, old acquaintance of Ethan's, if anyone asked. He'd bring all the documentation in a sealed folder. Meanwhile, I would arrive in a rideshare driven by one of Lydia's sons. She insisted we keep things discreet. She even offered to help me choose an outfit. Something simple but powerful, she said. You need to look like a woman who was never broken, just briefly misplaced. Saturday came fast. I woke early, heartbeat steady, hands calm. The nurses at Sunny Grove thought I was going out for a simple family dinner. I didn't correct them. I dressed slowly, carefully. A gray dress, soft fabric that moved when I walked, my old leather shoes polished to a shine, and around my neck the string of pearls Henry gave me on our 30th anniversary. Lydia waited with me in the garden until the car pulled in. You sure you're ready? She asked. I nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. The drive was silent. I watched as the streets changed, from quiet suburban rows to my neighborhood, familiar trees, familiar sidewalk cracks. Then, finally, the house. It took everything in me not to gasp. The porch was lit with lanterns. Fairy lights lined the hedges. Laughter drifted out the windows. There were people everywhere. Glasses in hand, camera phones up, heels clicking across my hardwood floors. And there they were, Ethan and Sophie, standing proudly at the center of it all. Ethan wore a navy blazer. Sophie, a cream dress that shimmered in the lights. They looked like the perfect hosts. I stepped out of the car and walked slowly toward the house. No one noticed me at first. Then I crossed the threshold. The music dipped, a few heads turned, a pause in conversation here, a whispered question there. Then Ethan saw me. His smile froze. Mom? I didn't stop walking. My eyes swept the room, now unrecognizable. The warm browns and cozy greens had been replaced with whites and metallics. Minimalist art on the walls. Henry's chair, gone, replaced by something angular and cold. Sophie appeared beside him, blinking in disbelief. Margaret, what are you... How did you... I stopped in the center of the room. Daniel appeared like clockwork, calm and professional, folder in hand. I hope I'm not interrupting, I said, voice level. Ethan swallowed. We thought you were... gone? I asked. Silence. Daniel stepped forward. Forgive the intrusion, everyone, but I represent Mrs. Lawson in a legal matter concerning this property. Gasps rippled around the room. Sophie turned pale. What is this? Forgery, Daniel said calmly, handing her the first document. Fraud, unauthorized property transfer, use of forged power of attorney, and misuse of financial instruments connected to this address. Ethan reached out, stammering, Mom, wait, we can talk about this. No, I said firmly. You talked enough behind my back, Daniel continued. These documents are being submitted to the appropriate authorities. You are hereby notified of the investigation. Mrs. Lawson has retained full rights to the property and intends to resume occupancy effective immediately. The room was dead quiet. A guest near the bar cleared his throat awkwardly. Someone else slipped out the front door. Sophie looked around, desperate. This is a misunderstanding. Margaret, we didn't mean... Didn't mean what? I asked. Didn't mean to lie? To move into my house while I slept in a room the size of a closet? To tear out my roses and throw away my memories? Her eyes welled, but I didn't care. This home was built with love, I continued. It's not a showroom, it's not a blog post, and it's not yours. I turned slowly, walking through the rooms, past the kitchen where Henry used to sneak sips of wine while cooking, past the hallway where Ethan took his first steps, past the living room where I used to grade papers while the radio played soft jazz. Everything was altered, but not erased. I could still feel the bones of it all, the spirit, and it was mine. I stopped at the mantel, where a flat screen now sat. I turned back to Ethan and Sophie. I'm not just reclaiming my house. I'm reclaiming my place in this family, and you, both of you, should be ashamed. Then I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The silence behind me said enough. It rained the next morning. A soft, steady drizzle tapped the windows of Sunny Grove as I packed my things. Not that there was much to gather, just a small suitcase, my notebook, the hollowed-out Bible, Henry's watch, and a few hand-labeled envelopes that Daniel had instructed me to keep safe. The staff helped carry things out with gentle hands and kind smiles. They still didn't know exactly what had happened, only that family arrangements had changed. I said goodbye to Lydia in the garden gazebo. She lit a cigarette and tucked her free hand into her coat pocket. "So that's it?" she asked, blowing out smoke. "The Queen returns to her castle?" "I suppose so," I said, smiling faintly. She studied me for a moment. "You nervous?" "Not really," Lydia smirked. "Good, because they don't deserve your fear." I hugged her tighter than I meant to. "Come visit, there's still a spare room." "Only if you serve real coffee," she said. "None of that watered-down nonsense." "I'll grind the beans myself." She laughed, and for a moment, it felt like we were young again, just two women navigating a world that often tried to shrink us. Daniel picked me up in his car. He helped me in like a gentleman despite my protests. As we pulled away, I glanced back once. Sunny Grove shrank into the mist, just a white shape behind hedges and rain. I didn't feel sadness, only closure. The drive was quiet. Daniel didn't ask how I felt. He knew. When we turned onto my street, I braced myself. My house, or what was left of it, came into view. The fairy lights from the night before had been taken down. The porch looked bare, lifeless. A few empty wine glasses still sat on the window ledge, forgotten by fleeing guests. Daniel parked and turned to me. "Are you ready to go in?" I never should have been forced out. He nodded once, stepped out and opened my door. Inside, the silence hit like a wave. The scent of citrus cleaner and fresh paint lingered. The floors were spotless. The clutter was gone. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a catalog. I moved slowly, my footsteps echoing. The kitchen was sterile, shining too brightly. The dining table was new, glass, no character. I touched the edge and felt nothing. In the hallway, Sophie's framed prints had replaced the old family portraits. I opened the closet where Henry's coats used to hang. Empty. Then I went upstairs. My bedroom door had been painted white. I pushed it open. Inside, there was no bed, just racks of shoes and handbags, a vanity covered in makeup brushes, jewelry, perfume bottles, a walk-in closet, just as the magazine described. I stood there for a long time, not crying, just breathing. Then I turned and walked down the hall to the guest bedroom, now mine again. Smaller, simpler, but familiar. Daniel was already downstairs reviewing the last of the documents. Ethan and Sophie had left quietly that morning, after receiving the legal notice and Daniel's final warning. If they returned or tampered with the property, charges would follow. He handed me a folder. "Everything signed. The house is legally back in your name. Full ownership, no loopholes left." "Thank you," I said, "for believing me." He smiled. "You didn't need me to believe you, Margaret. You needed me to help them believe the consequences." He left shortly after, giving me the space I didn't know I needed. For hours, I wandered the house slowly. I opened drawers, peeked into cupboards, pressed my palms against familiar walls, and the emptiness didn't hurt like I expected. It gave me room to breathe, room to remember. I made tea in a chipped old mug Sophie hadn't thrown out, probably because it wasn't fancy enough for the trash. I sat by the window in the living room, rain sliding down the glass in crooked lines. The garden was a mess, but the hydrangeas had survived. Henry's photo, thankfully tucked in the back of a hallway drawer, was now back on the mantel. I lit a small candle beside it, just one. I stood there in the quiet, watching the flame. "I'm home," I whispered, and the house, as if exhaling after holding its breath too long, settled around me. Word spreads quickly in a neighborhood like mine. By the following week, the whispers had begun. I saw it in the way my neighbor Mrs. Turner lingered longer at her mailbox, how Mr. Feldman across the street pretended to water his plants just a little too often. They were curious. Of course they were. One moment, Ethan and Sophie were the picture-perfect couple hosting wine nights. The next, they were gone. No goodbye, no moving truck, no explanation. Just vanished. I didn't offer any. Let the rumors swirl. Let them wonder. I spent my days slowly reclaiming the house, not restoring it to exactly what it was. Too much had changed, but making it mine again. I took down the soulless art Sophie had hung and filled the walls with what mattered. Old photographs, student letters, watercolors Henry had painted in his last years. The guest bedroom, my bedroom now, became my sanctuary. I placed Henry's watch on the bedside table and filled the drawers with freshly folded linens. The room smelled like lavender again. Daniel kept me informed throughout. Ethan had tried to file a counterclaim but quickly dropped it once Daniel filed a motion for criminal investigation. Sophie, predictably, ghosted him the moment things turned legal. She moved in with her sister out of town, deleting her social media in the process. Daniel suspected she'd pressured Ethan into the entire plan, but I didn't care whose idea it was. They'd both betrayed me. They'd both stolen from me, and they'd both be remembered for it. One morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, just my name, handwritten in shaky block letters. Inside, a single sheet of lined paper. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I messed up. I thought I was helping. I thought if we just took care of things, it would be better for everyone. I didn't realize what it would do to you. I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to say it anyway." I read it once, then again, then I folded it and placed it in the back of my notebook. Not out of sentiment, just record-keeping. Forgiveness? Maybe, someday, but not now. Not before trust was earned again. Not before actions proved what words couldn't. Weeks passed. The legal proceedings settled. The property was fully secured in my name. Ethan's brief attempt at a YouTube channel had fizzled out the moment the real story came to light. Sophie's makeover article disappeared from the magazine's website after a quiet request from Daniel citing fraud. Everything they built on lies began to rot. I began gardening again. The soil was hard at first, dry from neglect, but under the surface it was still alive, just needed some tending, much like me. One afternoon, while trimming the hydrangeas, Mrs. Turner finally crossed the street. "Margaret," she said gently, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but what happened?" I looked up at her, wiping my hands on my apron. "I took my home back," I said. "That's all." She smiled. "Good." And that was that. From time to time, I caught myself standing in a room, staring at nothing in particular, just listening, feeling, reclaiming. The silence that once felt so loud was now peaceful. Lydia wrote me letters, long, sarcastic, wonderful ones. She promised she'd visit once she got her knees cleared for travel. "Don't you dare redecorate before I get there," she wrote in one. "I want to judge the wallpaper myself." I wrote back that I wouldn't touch a thing. Henry's portrait stayed on the mantel. The guest book Sophie had ordered for her party? I found it in a drawer that half filled with compliments from strangers I'd never met. I burned it in the fireplace. Not out of anger, but because some memories aren't worth preserving. There's something oddly sacred about silence when it belongs to you. I woke up that morning to birdsong outside the window. Not the shrill cries that echoed around Sunny Grove, but real birds. Finches, maybe, nesting in the oak outside the guest bedroom. My bedroom now. I lay there for a while under the warm quilt, breathing slowly, letting the stillness settle over me like a second skin. The sun streamed in through sheer curtains, golden and soft. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my slippers meeting the hardwood floor that Henry once sanded by hand. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like a visitor in my own life. Downstairs, I brewed real coffee and none of that powdered nonsense Sophie used to buy in bulk. The smell filled the kitchen, weaving through the rooms like a thread stitching everything back together. I stood by the counter while it brewed, gently rocking on my heels, listening to the bubbling rhythm of the percolator. After breakfast, I took out the notebook. It had served its purpose. Every page, every entry, every quietly scribbled note had built the path that brought me home, but I didn't want to erase it. I didn't want to forget. Instead, I tucked it on the highest shelf in the study, right beside Henry's old poetry books. Maybe someday, if Ethan ever came back with more than an apology, I'd show it to him. Not to punish, but to remind. Reclaiming a home isn't just about paperwork and painted walls. It's about presence. I opened the windows and let the fresh air in. A breeze wandered through the house, carrying the scent of damp soil and hydrangeas starting to bloom again. I made my rounds like a priestess in a temple, touching the piano keys lightly, adjusting the photo frames, tightening a loose knob on the drawer Henry once fixed with glue and a prayer. There were still remnants of Sophie's taste lingering around, chrome drawer pulls, an aggressively modern light fixture in the dining room, but I didn't rip them out right away. I didn't need to erase her to feel like I belonged again. It was enough that she wasn't here. I opened the cabinet by the stairs where we used to keep board games. Inside, beneath a stack of untouched Monopoly sets, I found a small wooden box. My breath caught when I opened it. Inside were old family Christmas cards, ones Ethan had drawn as a boy, with crooked snowmen and glitter that still flaked off after all these years. I sat on the floor and ran my fingers across them. He was good once. Before the ambition, before Sophie, before something in him decided that having more mattered more than having roots. I didn't know if that boy was still in there somewhere, but I held on to those cards anyway. The phone rang mid-morning. Lydia. "You up yet?" she barked. "Or are you sleeping in like the spoiled landowner you are?" "Very much up," I laughed. "You should see the hydrangeas." "Don't tempt me. I've already circled a weekend. I'm coming next month." "I'll have the guest room ready. Make sure there's gin." "I'll make sure there's 2 bottles." She went on telling me about the latest drama at Sunny Grove, a chess match turned shouting match, a nurse who accidentally dyed her hair green from a faulty conditioner, the usual chaos. Her voice, brash and alive, made the house feel fuller. Even in the quiet afterward, the warmth lingered. That afternoon, I pulled out my recipe book. Pages yellowed, corners dog-eared. I baked a lemon cake. The smell of citrus and sugar filled the air. I imagined Henry walking in, saying, "That smells like Sunday." It did. I took a slice out to the porch, a cup of tea in hand, and sat on the old bench Ethan once painted for me in high school. The paint was chipped now, but I liked it better that way. Imperfect, honest. Across the street, Mrs. Turner waved as she watered her petunias. The clouds drifted slowly above, indifferent to the lives below. The street was quiet again. No music blaring from open doors, no guests clinking wine glasses, no curated laughter echoing from my living room. Just a street like any other, anchored by a house with its rightful owner once more inside. I thought briefly about the next chapter, about holidays alone, about Ethan. I didn't know if he'd ever come back, or if I'd even let him in, but I wasn't waiting for that anymore. This life, this home, was mine again, with or without his presence. I had my memories, my roots, my strength, And I had time. Not just time to live, but time to enjoy what I'd built, what I'd fought to get back. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long golden beams across the porch, I closed my eyes and listened to the birds again, still singing, still here. Now let me ask you this. What would you do if your own child tricked you out of your home? And do you think Margaret was right to confront them publicly? Or would you have handled it differently? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and press the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. And if someone in your life loves real-life drama and emotional stories like this, share the video with them too. You should be seeing more of our best videos on your screen right now. Go ahead and watch those next. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with a brand new story.